When you take a knife away from a child, give him a piece of wood instead. The words of a Kenyan proverb that bring us into this episode of the Jamaican Dadz podcast. I'm Dennis Brooks.
I'm Floyd Green.
And I'm Garth Williams, and we are
Jamaican Dadz.
This program provides a functional forum for us to tackle many of the taboo topics relating to fatherhood and parenting. And in this week's discussion, we're talking about co-parenting, how to make it work. But before we get there, let's fire off with the opening salvo. In this week's opening salvo, gentlemen, we discuss how do you determine the beneficiaries of your estate?
Over to you, Floyd.
You know that's not a legal question.
No, I mean, and I'll tell you why it's important for us to discuss it. Because I've come across a number of cases recently where, for example, there's a gentleman from Jamaica where he had two families, right? He started a family before he got married, yeah? And then he had a number of other children with his wife. When he died, yeah? When he died, and his estate was being wound up and whatnot, then they realized that he had a will, right? And the executor of the will identified who the beneficiaries should be, and only one of his children from his marriage was listed as a beneficiary. It was the other children before he got married that was listed, and I'm not quite sure what the details were, why he would have gone in that direction. But then it kind of gave me a moment to think. I'm like, but hold on, a man could have married and have pitney, and as much as him have a family before that, list only them as beneficiaries. What, did he discover something about the children from his marriage that that led him that way? I don't know, but I just thought it would be good for us to kind of have that conversation so people can be a little more aware and just think about what they do to others, because a time will come when obviously you may leave the earth before they do.
Yeah.
And in a case like that, or in cases like those, then what happens next?
Well, lawyers are creatures of instruction, but also they are creatures of counsel.
Yeah.
What kind of guidance do you give, like in having the conversation with somebody?
No, well, there could be a number of different reasons. Remember, again, you're right, you're creatures of instructions and counsel. So you do take instructions, and you have to follow those instructions, but you do guide and provide advice. God's situation, it could be that he never updated his will, right, which some people do, unfortunately. Right, and one of the things that you have to consistently do if you're doing a will is one, clearly do a will. I know we had a whole program about that in the last season, but update your will, right, because circumstances change, right, but they will go back to the last will on the record. So you can't update your will after you've passed, right? So let us say you had a first family and you put in your will all of those beneficiaries, right, and maybe he updated it once with the first child out of the new marriage, and then had more children, and then updated, and then died suddenly. So the critical thing is to ensure that your will always reflects your wishes. But that's the other thing. Your will is really your wishes. So you may not wish for your child to be a beneficiary.
Why would that be?
No, people have
I find it strange. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but people have a lot of, remember, relationships are different. You don't know what's happening. Maybe his will was recently updated. And that's what you should. That could be the flip side. In other words, as you said, maybe
It's
something
not a whole
happened.
will.
Maybe he wrote them out of his will. Remember, those things literally happen where people are written out of the will. So you and the person, family, son, wife, cousin, fall out.
Right.
And especially if they're of adult age, right? And you write them out. You say, listen, you call your lawyer and you say, listen, I've had wills change dramatically over the course of 5 years, right? And a lot of different things change with. A father might have a daughter who has gotten married and has taken the view that, okay, all of this that he was leaving for her, he now doesn't have to leave so much, and he's now going to leave it put more to his son, right? Or vice versa. I've had a father seeing his son get married and say, listen, he needs to do more for his son in case things don't work out, right? So there's a lot of different things. Remember, ultimately, you decide who your beneficiaries are, and it's your estate.
If you have, you say your will is your wishes, and would you say to people or counsel them away from changing will on a whim? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
like you're vexed now.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
No, absolutely.
Because people might be in love in the moment or the
and
opposite.
Absolutely. And normally when somebody comes in and wants to change the will, it's a big deal. Because you have to explain to them that if you were to walk out of here and die now, right? This because normally all will start with, you revoke all other wills. Right? So if you were to go out and you drop down dead, this is what's going to go forward. And especially if there are dramatic changes being made, right? And again, a number of things happen during the course of relationships that are emotionally charged, but that's not what you really want to happen when you pass. You understand? And you have to tell people to think about that. We've had wills where people provide for their ex-wives, despite the fact that they're ex, right? And people write them out and write them back in. Because, again, this is your ex-wife, but she has a child for you, yes, especially if it's a young child, right? And regardless, that relationship, you probably need to keep both of them if you have the wherewithal to do it in a good position.
Would you suggest pretty much to our listeners and everyone else that it is very important for you to also take very good notice of the people around you and how they deal with you and how you deal with them in preparing yourself for your departure? You know what I mean? We've seen cases where all of a sudden this lady comes out of nowhere, and I just use men because with men it's pretty popular. Lady comes out of nowhere, whirlwind romance, right? Whirlwind, sorry, I said whirlwind. Whirlwind romance, and she's right here now, and all of a sudden everything changed. It's all about her, completely forgetting, ruling out everyone else. I mean, I personally think it's very important for you to go, all right, you know what happened? Let me make a logical decision and kind of see how I can set up everybody else for success, so to speak, rather than just going on a whim.
I find that the biggest challenges often come when decisions haven't been made, right? So when then it leaves assets up in the air for people to fight over, right? I say, oftentimes you might have a long-standing relationship, children, that ends and then you move into something else, and that has now not as much years, but that's the last relationship you were in, serious relationship, and now when it finishes there's a lot of squabble over who should get what. So normally when it hasn't been properly planned, sometimes it's difficult because you want people to be genuinely good people, but sometimes the man or the woman has changed. They have left this scenario and they don't want to provide for it anymore. Right? And sometimes that's where it gets very difficult. Right? So they have completely rearranged their estate to cater for the new person. And it seems unfair and it seems unreasonable. But if that is the wishes of the person, people have to learn to respect it. And I find we have a lot of incidents happening where even though the person has made what you believe is a really poor decision, a really awful decision, he's not left money for his kids, he's left money for his new woman, right? But he's done so. It's his wishes and it's his money.
Are there things in Jamaica that like you can't do? Like you can't, I leave all my earthly possessions to my dog.
There are things that can be challenged, right? There are things that can be challenged, and wills have been challenged in relation to sufficiency, right? Especially if you have young children, right? That are not at the age of maturity. So there are things that people have taken to court to say provisions have not been made, and the child is a child that still requires care, and this is the father of the child or the mother of the child. I think so. There are things that can be challenged. They're not easy, right? But again, I said to people, do your documents, right? Do your documents, and also start establishing means to provide for your children and those you care about while you're alive in things that can survive after you. What I mean by that, instead of just generating all the wealth and then leaving it on a will, right? Start doing things like, all right, so you have a son, right? You buy a piece of property, maybe you want to put his name on the property now, right? So when you die, it automatically passes to him. You don't have to go through a will process, right? Maybe you want to start buying stocks for your child, right? And putting the name on the thing so that when you pass, it automatically passes. So it's not a haggling, it's not an argument, it's not a will this, will that. Right? So if you buy a piece of property and put it in joint tenancy, right, and you pass, then automatically it's going to flow.
I've heard people complain, I think, and you can correct me if what is the problematic, but I've heard people complain that my father put my name on this title and now I can't get something of my own from NHT because he put my name on this house up in the bush that I don't want to live in. How do you is that a smart thing to do? Because it might be you well-intentioned as a parent might be thinking,
and again it largely depends, because if he's going to take an NHT benefit and then the benefit is going to be credited to both of you because your name is on the title, then it stops your ability.
Yeah.
Right, but those things should be done with your knowledge and consent.
But
right?
like suppose you're like 5.
But that's the point. So again, I don't see it stopping your NHT benefit if you are not at majority, but it is something we'd have to look into, right? Because again, you wouldn't have had, and you wouldn't have any benefit.
And it might be something that you genuinely think is a good idea, but
always
10, 15, 20 years from now, it's not a good idea.
Always seek advice, because we oftentimes, do things not appreciating some of the legal ramifications, right? So always seek legal advice.
In the instance of business, the parent owns a business, and then that business has run up a certain amount of debt, right? But you bequeath this business to your child, or ownership of this business to your child. Market maybe the child may not necessarily have any interest in that, but you now inherit that debt.
Well, it depends. So all of those can be, if you have structured arrangements, you can guard against that. So if the business is really a company, right, that is registered, then the debts are the debts of the company, right? So you could decide to wind up the company, right? But clearly, if oftentimes father is running a business, say father passes off, child takes over, then the business as a going concern has to pay the debts that are there. Right? So you have to make a determination. Again, I have found one of the good models, and I think my uncle has done this very well, is that he has set his children up in businesses. Right? So this is like outside of his will, which is extensive. He's said, all right, listen, what you like to do? Right? All right, you studied hospitality. All right, I'm going to work with you. We're going to give you an area that is yours, and you can run your business. And you start your business as soon as other cousins, into trucks, are going to buy a truck, and you start your business. Separate business from my business. You do your separate business. Right? I still have my will, but at least start generating your own wealth. Income. Yes.
Right? What do you think also? Because again, we're looking at how do you decide who are your beneficiaries and what is a benefit. You might form a company and make the house the property of the company, and then you
get into problems.
No, I'm asking, could you then, instead of leaving the house to your son, put your son as I don't know how you would do it, as a part owner of the company? If you go, it's automatically
but again,
it doesn't have to be probated.
Yeah, so I've said I believe in those relationships that you can avoid the process, that it can pass directly, right? But again, all these things you have to take strong legal advice on, especially in terms of structure, right? Because most of them normally have, pluses and minuses. The critical thing from this discussion, I think, is one, determine who you want your beneficiaries to be, and don't do it in an emotional state of being, right? Update regularly if needs be, especially as circumstances change, right? You have a lot of people who want to, you have a long-standing employee who served you for years, and you want to know that if you pass, they're still okay, right? But it's always an afterthought. And then you hear the family saying, boy, I'm don't leave nothing for Dennis. And look how Dennis was with him for 50 years. And know that Dennis, and depend on him so much. So think very carefully about the people you care about, and not just family. Because again, at the end of the day, when you pass, final, choose very carefully who your executor is going to be. Who is going to administer your estate when you have passed. Because that can cause an answer to problems. And you hear the executor closer to X or closer to Y, and you understand? And that gives a difference. So very important
Yeah, and that's a good way to wrap up the opening salvo. Thank you so much for your legal experience and advice.
Just know you're going to be billed for need some legal fees.
Right? Let us know in the comment section if you want to book flight. No, I'm teasing.
No, let us know.
Right, but let us know in the comment section. Have you started to prepare your estate for your departure? Give it serious consideration and put it into action. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll be talking about co-parenting and how to make it work. But in the meantime, send us your thoughts and use the hashtag Jamaican Dadz. Of course, like and subscribe and share this episode right here on YouTube at Jamaican Dadz. All right, so we'll be back after this. Welcome back to the Jamaican Dadz podcast. Of course, as we mentioned in the previous segment, we'll be discussing co-parenting, how to manage and how to cope. And this evening, boy, let me tell you, we're up for a pretty good discussion. We have with us a young father. He is Dale Dwyer. And Dale, we're so happy to have you. Thank you for being a part of the Jamaican Dadz podcast this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, good. So, of course, we're talking about co-parenting, how to manage and how to cope. And essentially, it will be a discussion around your particular experience. It hasn't been all peaches and cream. It hasn't been all it hasn't been all rosy. But you, based on our conversation before, have made the best of it and continue to do so. Because your daughter is still just about 11 years old and so on. Don't want to get too much into your story without you telling our viewers and our listeners all about it. So let's go there, Dale. Let's go there. Share with us a little bit about that journey to becoming a parent. What was that like for you between you and the mother at the time?
To be honest, I was not ready to be a parent, right? So it's not like
How old were you?
I was 27, I think, at the time, or 28. Yeah, and it was one of those things where you do things and it happened, and your first impression would be, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna deal with this? But after you've decided, I guess, to go forward with it and start it out, then you just have to do it. So the journey, it's been a challenging journey. I mean, any first-time parent will tell you that, boy, it's rough. There were nights after the birth when the baby would want to sleep, and if they even go to sleep, they don't stay asleep for too long, that kind of thing. And then comes, the growing stage, and now we're at the point where there's a certain bit of individualism coming in and rebellion, so to speak. So you have to deal with all of that. But it's been an interesting journey, and I have no regrets. No, at this point, I have no regrets. Yeah.
Good. Now, I mean, you didn't just end up co-parenting overnight. Just share with us a little bit about how that situation came about, where obviously you and the mother would have fallen apart, probably fallen out of love, so to speak.
Yeah.
But right. So just kind of give us the lead up to that. Did you see signs? And just talk to us about that bit first.
Well, to a certain extent, I guess it's my fault in a way, right? So when it happened, it happened before the baby was born. She wanted us to be a family, so to speak, but I guess I didn't feel the same at the time, and I expressed the same to her that, hey, listen, I'm not ready, and it is not what I want right now and stuff. So I made that decision. I told her that, hey, listen, we don't have to be together for the child. And so before the child was born, it was like that, and after the child was born, it continued, and I guess I just did my part as best as I could, and I guess she did her part. And so
Yeah.
that's the essence of it, really.
Do you suppose that your unwillingness at the time to be together And I like what you said. You don't have to be together for the child, you know.
Right.
But we'll come back to that in just a moment. What do you suppose? I don't want to put words in your mouth. Let me ask you the question. What would have led you at that point to not wish to pursue a family unit with that young lady?
Um, Honestly, it was just a personal decision. It was a feeling, like a vibe I was getting at the time. That this wasn't what I want, and this wasn't who I want. And even though it happened, and persons will say, well, if you didn't want to be with the person, why are you going to have sex with the person and stuff like that? But it's not that simple, you know. And sometimes you have to think of the bigger picture and think of your own happiness and things like that. And I just determined at the time that this is not what I want. Um, the child is fine, the child is coming and will be taken care of. But um, in terms of being a family and being with that person, that wasn't what I wanted at the time. So I made that decision.
Yeah. Now, you said this was before the child was born. Obviously, she would not have responded positively
Oh,
to that decision of yours. Share with us how she reacted in the moment when you made the revelation to her, told her about your decision, and then what next?
well, obviously she didn't take it, lying down. She blamed me for years. She said that, okay, listen, we could have been a family, and even after the child was born, she kept harping on about it, saying we should have done it and stuff. But I had I guess, a certain resolve then that I wanted it this and I didn't want that, and as such, I just stuck with it. It wasn't the most popular decision at the time, not for her and her family and stuff. And everybody was saying, even the church, because I was a part of the church, and the church was saying, hey, why don't you just get married to this person since this person is pregnant? You've heard of those stories, right? But no, that was a no go for me. I was not thinking of that at all. And I just stuck with that. And it was, as I said, for years after that, it continued where, the conversation came up periodically about why didn't we do this? And my answer was always the same. It was just not something I wanted to do. And I have no regrets about it.
And let's talk through now what would have happened when mommy had to go for her visits to the doctor, her regular checkups, which would have become more frequent closer to delivery date. Mm-hmm. When you had to, for example, go get that ultrasound done, if you wanted to find out the sex of the child before birth and so on. How did that journey continue? Because the co-parenting process is really a process of coexistence as you go forward.
Right.
So describe that phase of that prenatal phase.
Yeah. Okay. So to be completely honest, right? I was not very involved in that process. Initially, yes, I know, and I have publicly apologized to her for that. Right. I had doubts, and that was my reason. Right. I had doubts at the time. I had doubts, and I expressed that to her, and that I had doubts, and I told her that, listen, if it's my child, then you have nothing to worry about. I will be the perfect father, right? I will definitely do my part. But at the time I had doubts and I wasn't very involved in that whole process. But as much as possible, I was, I tried to be supportive. And when it got to the point where, she was supposed to deliver and all of that, I was very involved in that. And from that moment. So, but before, it wasn't, she did like the doctor visits and stuff. She did most of that on her own.
Right. And you, I suppose, would have checked up. Did she call you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Right, I just didn't accompany her for most of those visits.
right? And of course, the big question has to be: I can probably imagine some women and maybe some men too screaming at their screens or at the radio. Were you there financially as well, despite the doubts you had, especially in that lead up to the baby being born?
Yeah, yeah. For the most part, yeah, I was, and to a greater extent, close at the delivery time of the delivery and subsequently. But it was not a, I guess, a financially demanding time beforehand, but I was still supportive. I went around, we talked, I stuck around and all kind of stuff. And so I was still there. It's just not it wasn't a full time involvement, and,
Okay.
and as I said, I have told her that, listen, I should have been more involved. I was young, I wasn't quite ready. Um and it just happened that way. And it happens. We're humans, and sometimes we make decisions at the time that were not the best.
Yeah.
But you get some time, and you hope you get a chance to redeem yourself.
Right. So, which means you'd have probably missed out on rubbing the belly. Did you get
No,
involved
I
with
didn't.
any?
I didn't. I didn't. I didn't.
None
I
of
did
that
some
at
of that.
all.
I did some of that.
You
Yeah.
did some of that. Okay. Okay. And in those moments, though, which obviously would have brought you physically together, did you reconsider? Did you say, "Oh, I wonder if the decision I made was the right decision," or you were just there to ensure that you know what happened? Let me just make her comfortable and try and just chip in as best as I can.
No, no. It was more like the former. There were moments when I did think about it. I was like, okay, maybe this could work. And then something would happen, and I'm like, that's why it can't work.
Mm,
So it was like that, but I was there, but not fully there. And she was never on her own, so to speak. So even though I wasn't involved 100%, but I was still there, still around, still supported, still knew everything that was happening, the rubbing of the belly, all kind of that. I knew the kicking. I
mhm.
was privy to that. So we did have moments, where we're close and all of that, but it was just not, you know, the full package then, what
Yeah.
she would have wanted at the time.
Having had a chance to look back, Dale, and we're still sticking with that prenatal phase before baby gets here, right? Or before baby got here.
Right.
If you were to think of doing things differently, are there any things, or is there anything you would have done differently, given the benefit of hindsight at that phase?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, despite my doubts, I should have been more involved. I I think I let myself down, and I let her down. And at the end of the day, the doctor visits and stuff like that, I should never have allowed her to do all of that by herself. And I think that is my greatest regret. I wasn't more involved in that aspect of it. But as I said, overall, there was some level of involvement. It's just those moments when she would have wanted some company to maybe go to prenatal clinic or something like that, and I wasn't there. So that is my greatest regret in that regard.
Yeah. And I suppose if you were to advise any fathers to be, or fathers in that particular position at the moment, you would say to them, hey, be there more often, be present more
Absolutely.
often.
Yes, I would say, listen, even if you have doubts, be there until you can dispel the doubts. There's no point in saying, okay, you're going to chip in after you're sure. She needs you. And I mean, the baby needs you and needs us all the way. So even if you have doubts, it's best to just support so the baby can come out healthy and all right. And then you can confer yeah, this one.
Yeah.
So,
You're tuned in to the Jamaican Dad's podcast, co-parenting, how to manage and cope. We're speaking with father Dale Dwyer. We'll come back with more right after these messages. Welcome Welcome back to the Jamaican Dadz podcast. I'm Garth Williams, and this evening in this program we are discussing co-parenting, how to make it work. Co-parenting, how to manage and how to cope. And we have with us this evening for the discussion Dale Dwyer, and Dale is a parent who, in a former life, was still presently co-parenting. He has a family, and we'll get into that new family discussion in a moment. But we've been discussing his co-parenting journey. And of course, I've got to explain in very simple terms to our listeners, or remind our listeners what co-parenting is. Co-parenting really is the act of parenting your child, raising a child where the parents are separated, physically separated, and in many cases too, emotionally separated, but still combine forces where the child is concerned to ensure that all the best things or the best outcomes are met where the child is concerned. So, Dale, let's continue our conversation. You owned up in the previous segment to having made a very strong decision to not go the route of being a family unit with the mother of your now 11-year-old. And you also admitted that, you would have done things differently. You would have been primarily more present in mommy's life during that phase of the journey prior to birth, right? Which is very important. And I must applaud you for owning up to it. You said you've apologized to her. And the good thing is you're a father who is present in the life of your child, and you continue to work this co-parenting balance with the mother of your child. But I must also ask you the flip side of that question. Is there anything that you think mommy could have done to really pull you in more to being more present, or did she do it all and you just kind of stuck with your decision?
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask that question. If you ask me, I think yes, she could have done more. Sometimes when she was going to the doctor, I didn't know, right? So I couldn't have gone even if I wanted to. I didn't know some of those times, but I'm sure if you ask her, she's gonna say, "Oh no, he was not interested, so I didn't tell him." So, and I guess in a way, I can't really blame her, completely. But there was not much effort at the time. There was some anger and some disappointment, and I guess we just sort of pulled apart. Then in terms of certain communication and all of that, and it just never. I guess it never helped either of us in the end.
Yeah. But one of the things I want to follow through on, or follow up on, I should probably say, is that statement you made in the previous segment where you said you explained to her, and I think very succinctly, probably what you said to her was much longer, but you succinctly put it as, we don't have to be together for the child.
Right.
Just kind of break that down. I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but just break down the thinking and the conversation that you had with her to arrive at that particular.
Some persons are of the belief, and some mothers. I think it's more the mothers, and I hope I don't get any stick for this, but they're. It's almost like they're saying you can't be with the child if you're not with me. I've heard that, I've seen it, and it's not true actually, and I think that causes some unhappy unions because you feel like it's the child's fault that you're together and you're miserable. And I'm saying no, let us not do that. We have the child. By all means, we're gonna do everything we can for that child to make that child happy, give them everything we can to make them comfortable growing up, but we don't have to be together for that. I can do my part. I will visit as often as I can, see that child. I will participate in that child's development, provide all I can for that child. And you are the mother, you the motherly love and making sure that everything that I provide, that the child gets it and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, you have a child. The child will grow and understand that, okay, mommy and daddy are not together, but I am still happy. And I think that is important to, the development of the child.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is. When you had that, when you made that explanation, when you shared that logic, when you had the conversation, how did she respond? Was she able to kind of see it through that lens, or no?
No, no, because I had that conversation with her years upon years. It always came back to that conversation where why can't we be together, and then it usually went into, okay, we don't have to be together for us to, so we always end up with that same conversation to say, hey, listen, we don't have to be together for the child, for us to take care of the child, and that's always my belief. I just think that that's I believe strongly about that, and I just stuck with it, that the child could be fine even if we're not together. And 11 years later, I still believe so.
Yeah. Now let's talk after baby was born. Do you know whether by observation or confession from mommy, if, for example, after the child was born, in that phase where postpartum depression is a very strong reality, do you know if she went through that?
Um, I don't know. I don't think she got an opportunity to go through that, because from the moment the child came out, I was there. I was very involved at that point, and most nights, I guess, I was there. I was, I knew what was going on with her at that point, and I think
Mhm.
it's fair to say that she was okay. She handled it well because she got the support at that point. So I think she was okay with that.
And that support was not only from you. Her family, I do suppose, was strong on that as well.
Yes, yes, her family supported her. My family supported her definitely. So she had support from all angles really at that point.
So, so how you manage now, dear? Because essentially you were emotionally unavailable to this young woman, right? But of course, physically available for your child, which is good, which is very good. But how did you manage to kind of balance that? Because there would have been some kind of sparks there, which would have led you down a particular path to make this baby.
Right?
But
Mhm.
then being emotionally unavailable now, but physically available, how did you manage those two? Because I think that's probably a conflict many men who have to co-parent must deal.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a real thing, right? It's like the I guess the perfect dilemma. you know, you want to be there, all the time, but and you're there physically, but the possibility is that sometimes you're there emotionally as well, right? So you may have made a decision and listen, we're not going to be together, but then you might have moments of slipping up and, where something happened, right? So, and that has happened, and it's just part of it, it's part of it, but in the end, it was just a moment, I suppose, and sometimes it caused problems down the road where you would see the conversation would say, okay, why are you doing this and whatever. So I said, okay, you know what, maybe it's best for us not to do that at all. So it has happened where the boundaries got crossed, and that's a real part of the reality. But I think we're big people and we can deal with disappointments, and that's how I saw it. It's we went into this decision with our eyes wide open. Whatever happened, happened.
And in those moments when you realize that boundaries were being crossed or had the potential to be crossed, did you retreat and pull back, or did you just go, all right, here what happened? I recognize what it is. Let me just try and manage my way through it.
Yeah, I think it was more the latter for me. I knew what it was. Right, there was obviously still some level of physical attraction and stuff involved, and I didn't fight it. I knew what it was, and I wasn't disillusioned as to where it was going to lead. Um, at the end of the day, you know, it just happened, and I may have dealt with it differently from her, but I'm not going to fault myself for that, because it wasn't a decision where it wasn't a situation where I deceived her, or led her down that path.
Yeah. We've got more to discuss on the other side of these messages, Dale, because we're going to get down into custody and how that worked out, or is working out, continues to be worked out. We're also going to talk a little bit about the level of discipline and maturity and objectivity that is necessary so that the child doesn't suffer, right? And also, we'll get into some tips for gentlemen, for mothers, but we're certainly be targeting our men for tips around co-parenting. You're tuned into the Jamaican Dadz podcast. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the Jamaican Dadz podcast. I'm Garth Williams, and of course, we're discussing co-parenting, how to manage, how to cope. And we've got with us Dale Dwyer. Almost called you Dyer there, Dale. Dale Dwyer, who is a father who is co-parenting, and also has a newborn. But we soon mention the newborn. We soon get into that little bit of it in just a moment. But Dale, you've been such a revelation. You've really shared some really good gems. You've owned up to your faults. You've owned up to your shortcomings. You've taken a look back with hindsight and saw where you could have done things differently. And most importantly, I think I can say you've grown. Yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Good. Now, co-parenting requires quite a bit of maturity, quite a bit of discipline, a square focus on remaining objective, and obviously ensuring that everything is done for the benefit and the welfare of the child. How difficult has that been overall over the past 11 years?
Wow. I think overall, like it's been mostly good, but then there were some really bad moments. There were moments when I was giving and I was told that, hey, listen, you're not giving enough. And as such, I even ended up at the family court at one point. I was told that I wasn't giving enough time and I wasn't giving enough money and all of that. That's something that will definitely come up as part of the co-parenting. The interesting thing is that when we went there, we didn't go all the way to the courts. We went to a guide, a counselor, and that person, they shut it down. They're saying, listen, you don't have a case. He's very involved. He sees the child minimum 4 or 5 times for the week, and he's providing financially and all of that. So you have it. Basically, they were saying, listen, you have it good compared to some persons. And it's not about bragging or boasting. I've never done that. It hasn't been that. It was just being a father. And my father was a father to me, and he set a very good example. And I just decided that, hey, I have to be a father. So I'm going to be there. And so I never allowed my child to be short of anything. I couldn't understand why we were there. So that was one of the most difficult moments for me. We had other moments over the years, it usually comes down to money. It's always money is a big thing. Why you can't do this? Why you can't give more? But the reality is that if you have someone who is willing to work with you, even though things are not, the way they want it to be, but they are willing to accept that this is the case and work with you, it's possible. We can do it. You can do it. Yeah. And I had my difficulties, but we're still here and we're doing it for the benefit of the child.
I heard you mention your father, because I would have gotten there, but since you brought it to the fore just now, you said your father was a good father to you. How did he? Excellent. How did you lean on him? How did he advise you to that decision you made that, hey, I don't want to be a family unit with this young lady? But what was his word and his input through it all?
Well, in that regard, it was really my father and my mother. They both say to me, listen, your happiness is important, But whatever decisions you make sure that the child is not affected. That's always what they stuck to, and it stuck in my head. And I guess even when I had my moments of frustration and anger and all of that, it always came back to me. And whenever I speak to them, they say, "Listen, whatever you do, make sure that the child is okay. Make sure you're still providing for your child because it's your child. It's not someone else's child." And that's it. And it's the best advice I've ever been given.
Yeah. On the matter of custody, which is a very important matter, describe what that situation was like, and were there challenges? Were there any times when mommy was withholding your daughter from you? Did you go through any of that?
No, as a matter of fact, I never had that problem. If anything, she accused me of not taking the child enough. That was really the issue for her. Listen, oh, you're not taking her on weekends and all of these things. It was never a case where I couldn't see her if I wanted to see her. So I was okay in that regard. We're good. We're good.
Would you have done anything differently where that is concerned? I mean, you still have time to to address
Yeah,
that,
I
but
mean, well, in nowadays, because things are a little different, and I have my own family now. She comes by on weekends, and most weekends she's here with me
okay.
and stuff. We hang out, and I take her home like on a Monday, and so we're doing better.
Good. And since you mentioned your family, I really wanted us to get there. You have a newborn. You have another daughter, yes?
Yes, I do. She's two
Like
months
what?
plus.
Right. Like, yeah, I figured that I was doing the math in my head, you know.
Yeah.
So she's all right, 2 months plus, almost 3 months. Describe what things have been like, because obviously with last week in our previous episode we discussed being a stepfather. So and in a way your current partner would be responsible for
Yeah.
maintaining a certain level of discipline and interaction, certainly when your daughter, your firstborn, comes by. How has that situation worked itself out?
Well, I mean, it's all about the person, and the person I'm with, that is not a problem at all. As a matter of fact, she has a son, so technically I'm a stepfather, right?
Ah, all right.
Yes, and we have a good interaction, the child and I, and my daughter and her. It's good. It's the synergy. The synergy is good. The synergy is good, and I'm happy for that. And I can't say that. I mean, I've had other relationships over the years, right? But I've never really had one where I felt like it was, a problem. Them talking to her or even disciplining her or anything like that. It was not no abuse or anything like that. So I think it has been good, but it's always going to be a concern for people. When you're with someone, you're not with the person who you're with the child. You got the child with, and you're concerned about this stepfathers or stuff like that.
Stepmothers.
Yeah, stepmothers, right? But I think I leave that responsibility on her mother. So if she's with a guy and a new guy, and it's up to you to protect my child while they're around that person. And the same goes for me. When she's around me, it's my responsibility to protect her, and guide that process, introduce them gradually and deal with it. And most of them leave the disciplining to me. So it's fine. I'm okay.
Good. You say your current partner has a son,
Yes.
which means she is also co-parenting that child.
Yes.
Um, when you take a look at, I mean, obviously different situations, different environments, different people. However, do you observe or have you observed any similarities between her co-parenting situation and yours, or any differences between your situation and hers that kind of jump out at you that you probably want to share in this forum?
Well, as a matter of fact, it's very similar. His father lives in the States.
Okay.
So I guess it's different in that regard, in that he doesn't see him as frequently as I do my daughter, right? Or that kind of thing. But he still provides. He provides, so that's great. And he talks to you practically and stuff. But there will always be differences of opinion, and all of that. And I still see that coming out. But it's all part of the process. My thing is, we just have to be big people about it. Understand that there will be differences, but at the end of the day, we know why we're doing this, and so we have to continue doing it.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy to hear you say these things there, because let me tell you, it's a tough situation. It's not the easiest one to navigate. It's not ideal, but things happen, and people separate for different reasons. But again, when you take a look back at it, it must be that you are focused on ensuring that the child absolutely benefits. If you were to name or identify two major points, or maybe three major points for any father, especially to consider in his co-parenting situation, what would those three big things be?
Okay. So I would say, as I said earlier, you have to be there from the beginning. That's something that I think is very important for your state of mind, for the mother's state of mind, and for the development of the baby. So I believe that's a critical thing. Don't be like me to say, okay, if I find out when the baby is born that it's my baby, then I'll take care of it. I think you should from the beginning just man up, deal with it. That's the first thing. Second thing is always provide for your child. Don't let your child go hungry ever, right? So a child might not have the prettiest clothes, but whatever happens, make sure the child doesn't go hungry, right? And thirdly, it's it's important to understand why you're doing it, especially when it comes to disciplining, right? You have to have, even if you have different mindsets. When it comes to discipline, you have to have a singularity, right? And you have to display a singular front for that child, because then the child will lean on the one that they consider the weakest link, right? Or the one that they're still going to enable them. So what happens whenever the child does something wrong, one parent can pick up for that baby child, and then the next one, be disciplining the child. So that's something that is very important. Or else you're going to basically get a spoiled child. Believe.
Absolutely. Amongst, I want to mention a couple other points that I'm just glancing at here. Be flexible, even if it hurts you sometimes. That's very important. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes. Be accessible as well.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that, remember, you have a child, so your
you have
schedule,
to be
your
available.
life.
Yes, you have to be available.
Right. Fair doesn't always mean equal.
That's true. That is not. That is actually true. That's very true. Yes.
You have to keep that in mind. Never badmouth the other parent.
Aha, that is what I'm saying, and that is a situation I had to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be very careful of that. Whatever differences you might have and how you feel about the person when you're speaking to the child, do not portray that, because you can create a level of disrespect, and then the child can actually become like a two-sided cutlass, as they say, where they carry news both ways, and that's very dangerous. You don't want that.
And that's another thing. Don't use the child as a messenger. Tell your father say, tell your mother say.
Yes.
No, have adult conversations, do adult things, speak with each other maturely as adults. But if you're going to use a third party to communicate, never let that third party be the child.
It should never be the child.
Yeah. Do you call her, as in the mother, on her birthday? Do you send her text messages or anything like that? Merry Christmas, anything of the sort? Or
I do, and I mean, I do see her fairly frequently, because I still visit, and we talk. Sometimes we even talk about our own lives or personal lives away from the child. But the bulk of the conversation is really around that. So yeah, I will say, happy birthday, happy Mother's Day, stuff like that. I do. She may not get a gift, and that's just how it goes. It's a personal decision. I don't get a Father's Day gift either, so that's okay, right?
so it's almost even, right?
Yeah, we're even. It's fine. But yeah, we do communicate.
Good. Listen, boy, Dale, I'm very happy for the conversation that we had. And for our viewers and our listeners, especially, we're going to be dropping a number of these tips around co parenting in the description below the video. So make sure that you check it out, on, of course, on our YouTube channel. We couldn't get into all of them. We could have spoken for hours with you, Dale, but this is where we're going to have to close the conversation. But we thank you very much for your openness, for your honesty, for your frankness, for being as mature as you have been. And we wish you all the very best with the big one, but most importantly as well at this time with the little one. And for you and your family at home now, the unit that you've chosen to build in your home, we wish you lots of joy, lots of success. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Good. So stay tuned, folks. We're going to come back and close the Jamaican Dadz podcast. We've just been speaking with Dale Dwyer, a parent who is in the middle of raising his child via co-parenting. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Jamaican Dadz podcast. If you're just joining us, we've been having a conversation about co-parenting and how to make it work. There are all sorts of dynamics that you have to consider. One of the lessons that we naturally have learned is the need for patience and understanding and the best interest of the child.
The child. Focus on the child.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes, absolutely. So again, thanks to Tashai Grant and the production team. Thanks, Floyd and Dennis, as always. Please connect with us on social at Jamaican Dadz. That's on Facebook and Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And on Twitter, it's the Jamaican Dadz. As ever, please subscribe and let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Take care until next time.